So you were the first person to buy your seat in LIFFE, and the only other people on the exchange were basically major institutions and banks.
I remember standing in the pit one day and I had Sullivan Brothers one side, Barclays Bank, Wed Durlacher, and I think Greaves and Grant the other side. I mean, all sort of, one American mob, but basically British institutions standing around me, asking me what I thought of the market. It's time to step on the gas. Sometimes you have to put the foot to the metal, and accept the consequences. But I mean, you don't do it on every trade. If I've got a 5-star view and I look at a few technicals and they sort of align, then it's a foot to the floor. You should be in the trade for a reason, and that reason is the price. It's not the P&L. The price is always right. It's a dissemination of people's positions. You hear so many traders, as I said earlier on, the market's out to get me, should never have gone here, can't do this, can't do that. The price tells you where it can go, and it can go anywhere a lot worse than you've ever thought or think it can do. It can get 10 times worse.
Welcome back to the Unpacking the Markets podcast. Now, before we kick off, can I please ask you to subscribe to this channel so that we can continue to grow and help traders worldwide. Let's get into it. Now, when we first met, you told me a little bit about your story, and I really want to get through a lot of it because it's a stunning story from pit trader to CEO of a prop firm to entrepreneur. You have been plus 50 years in markets, right? So it's incredible. But all the way back to the 60s, 70s is when you got started, right? So, and you said something quite interesting to me when we first met. It was, that it was quite difficult to get into trading from someone from your side of the town, I think you said. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like?
I sort of started, when I sort of left school or kicked out of school or whatever it was, at sort of 17 years old. And, I sort of started doing some odd jobs and bits and pieces. Then a relative of my grandfather's told me I was a reasonably clever fella and should get my arse in the city. And he fixed me up an interview, and I went and sort of went up the city for the first time, I think. And in those days, it was very blue-blooded, and there wasn't many people from the suburbs, the uneducated side of the suburbs that really got a chance to get in. And I was very fortunate. The guy took a shine to me and, offered me a job as a pretty menial job, I must admit. And within a few weeks, I'd sort of got bored with that and started sniffing around. And, someone took me on the floor of the stock exchange, and, I went down there, and it seemed quite exciting, although it was a bit old-fashioned, to say the least. So I managed to get myself down there as a blue button, which was a sort of runner, really. In those days, there was no communications. All the orders were sent out by hand on a bit of paper. So it was very archaic, but, still very exciting. And then, I won't go on that too much. Then I managed to get myself made up as a dealer on my 20th birthday, which is the youngest you could be a dealer. And then the stock exchange almost collapsed. And there was no FTSE 100 then, it was all FTSE 30. And it almost collapsed, and everyone all the youngsters were disappearing to the foreign exchange market, money markets in those days rather than Forex, because it was foreign exchange controls. But it was the money markets or the commodity markets. And I managed to slide into the commodity markets on the cocoa exchange, which is a very small sort of pit type thing, but it was more like little telephone kiosks around a central arcade. And done completely differently. But it was open outcry, and it certainly gave me a sort of flavour of what the thing was all about. So I quite enjoyed that for a year or so, and I moved into the sugar market. I had a couple of very good years trading on the sugar market for the company, I might add. And I did a couple of trips to like the New York sugar dinner and the sort of Chicago sugar dinner, and all sorts of dinners and places we went to, which is very fortunate for someone who was 23-4 or whatever it was, 22-3. And then towards the end of the 70s, they the coffee, I think it was the coffee market, merged with the sugar and the cocoa market. They were in the World Trade Centers at the time, and they merged together, and there was a lot of arbitrage opportunities from the sugar market and the cocoa market. The company I was working for wanted to set up an office in New York to have a presence there to control the arbs or work the arbs from the New York side, and meet the clients and mess around a little bit. So I volunteered to go and set up this office in New York, Walter and Wall. It was just off Wall Street. So I went home one day and said to the missus, right, I've just been taking this job. We're off to New York. She went, what? And we had two very young kids at the time, I think 18 months and 3 or whatever. And she said, when are we going? I said, well, 2 weeks' time. So she had loads of tearful moments with her mum and dad, and my mum and dad sort of saying, he's gone mad, he's taken us off to New York. And so that's what we did. We went off to New York and we lived in Manhattan for a little bit. And then my wife hated Manhattan. It was a pretty dangerous place in the late 70s, New York. So we rented a house out in Westport, Connecticut, which was quite a sort of plush area. And I commuted in on the train or drove in, because sometimes I did the London hours in New York. So I drive past Studio 54 and see the Herberts coming out of that and, get to the office. But yeah, it was a marvellous time. But what it did, it gave me, because the financial had only really started in Chicago, mid-late 70s, the financials, because that was all agricultural stuff out there, as was New York. And the financials only sort of started out on the CME. I think it was the Eurodollars might have started in 77 or 79, I can't remember. But it was an emerging thing. So, having gone down on the pit in the sugar market in New York, and then a trip to Chicago and looked at the pits there and seen the potential explosive growth and how it worked, and the fact that the biggest eye-opener was, I'd spent 5 years trading the company's funds, making some really serious money for that day and age, and getting paid what you think at the time is quite a good bonus. But in reality, it was nothing compared to what you're putting in the company pot. So, the opportunity, I thought that was where the opportunities were, being on the pits. And I thought it was going to be out in New York and Chicago. And then one day I read an article in the New York Times about, Brian Williamson and, so I think Jenkins and a couple of others was set up a steering committee in London to establish this London International Financial Futures Exchange, which was going to be, the centre of Europe for financial trading. So that, for me, my wife was a bit homesick, and it was, well, maybe I can go back to England and do what I want to do out here. And so that's really where it came from. So, we I had a few family issues going on at the time as well, which prompted a few weekend return trips. So it made perfect sense to come back and get set up on life. And I've managed to save a couple of quid out in New York. So, I approached what was, I think it was John Foyle and Juliet TradrLab at the time, who were setting up all the membership criteria. And, they tried to get me the seat before the market opened, but unfortunately couldn't get it from day one. So I went down there for the company that I'd set up on the sugar floor. I went down, I advised them to buy a seat anyway. I went down and I was trading from day one with my own money under their badge, and my seat came through within a couple of weeks. So, it's, but I'm sure, and most people would say I was the first independent trader on the life market. There were some guys from Chicago who came over, bought seats for a bit of fun, but they weren't committed to the cause as such. And I saw it as a way of breaking down barriers, in the city of London, which it not treated me badly, but I'd had quite a good run since I've been there. But there was a very two-tier exchange and markets all across the city. It was very, you were never welcomed and you were never encouraged to be there. It was almost like you were getting in the way, coming from the wrong part of town, or coming from the wrong sort of school. It was there for the establishment, and they'd divvied it up for many decades. Big wide prices, trading with your mates, all that legal shenanigans that still goes on today to a large extent. But yes, I saw it as a way of getting in and breaking down some walls, and and also making a couple of quid, which always helps the cause. But so I mean that's where it all started from in life, really. And I think looking back in hindsight, I probably loved it too much, and I probably took it too seriously, and really thought I could make a difference. And consequently, I gave up a lot of probably chances and edges that some of the guys who came in 5 years later, when it had all been established, and it was an institution in the city, did a lot better, because they came in for one particular reason. That was to build their business, make their money, and go. I sort of believed it was a mission of mine and a calling to, change the city of London. And but it's probably very naive in hindsight, and even thinking about it today, it's quite naive. But it's just what it is. I've got no regrets. So sometimes you look back, and I tend not to look back very often. But people ask me questions like yourself, and you start thinking, well, maybe I could have done a few. But I mean, I had to sort of remortgage my house and put everything on the line to buy a life seat, and 99.9% of the institutions in the City of London bought a seat because they were told they had to by the Bank of England. None of them wanted to do it, and they all thought it would be worthless and a complete waste of time. So I put my whole life on the line to buy a seat in the market because I believed in it, and that gave me the passion to do what I did, really. Yeah. But having seen it in New York, where a lot of these guys haven't even bothered to go to New York or Chicago. So, and the stockbrokers and the institutions, most of them, they sent the guys they couldn't sack and wanted to sack, they sent them to run the life market, thinking it would be dead within 6 months and they could get rid of them. And those guys, a lot of those guys went on to run those companies because life was so successful, and the other side of the business went downhill pretty quick. But anyway, right, I'm ranting already, so. You better sort of pull me up.
Because you said so much there, but I'm whether you like it or not, I'm going to go back through it, right? Because when we first met, you said something I loved. You said, you were born to be a pit trader, and can you I guess tell me a little bit about what it was like the first time you saw the open outcry pits when you were trading cocoa, sugar?
Well, I was never allowed in the pits in Chicago because you just weren't allowed in. That was sort of all local families, if you understand. Okay. And so I was on the sides, just observing to a large extent. But I mean, when you walk into it, anyone who's had the privilege to walk into a big open outcry exchange like the CME, not so much the New York one, that was smaller, but I mean the life market and the markets that have really worked. And you walk through those doors and you hear the noise, and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and you either absolutely love it or you think it's the most terrifying thing you could ever do in your entire life. And there's not much between it. It's very binary. And that's when I say to people, you could tell if someone was going to be a reasonable trader or not right from the off. That was a phrase meant for the pits rather than electronic, because some people thrive on the pit type atmosphere. Being not necessarily being a bully, but you're in an environment, you're in a very small space with maybe 100 people or 150 people, chewing each other's eyes out all day long, trying to bury everyone around you, and everyone's doing the same, but you can't get violent. You can't, it's a bit like being a boxer, I guess. It's controlled aggression, and you do that sweating, and and it's so exhilarating and so fulfilling. And then at the end of the day, you all go and have a beer. Some people have been wiped out. Some people have made a lot of money. But you stood on your own 2 feet, and I've always been the sort of person that like standing on my own 2 feet and never really needed an audience or a crowd behind me. I've always done things on my own. And, that environment in a pit of, 100, 150 people, if you believe in your own ability, there was opportunities to make it work. And it's just the way, there was very, very few people, people meek and mellow who sort of worked it on the floor. It was the big and the brash and the ugly that tended to do better because it was that sort of environment. And I don't know if you were fortunate enough to go to any of the big exchanges, because you're probably not old enough. But it was that light bulb moment, and people froze when they came through the door, and when we had quite a few celebrities that came down there, and footballers and those politicians and those sorts of people, and it was sort of interesting to see their reaction. And the only one who didn't change one iota was the Queen when she came down, but then the markets were somewhat more subdued when she came for a walk around than they were when, we had Samantha Fox and the other sort of page 3 girls came down there. And you can imagine it a tad on the raucous side.
As if they needed any more aggression in there, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so, do you think? I guess those two characteristics that you mentioned that jumped out at me were kind of a level of independence and strong kind of confidence. Do you think those would be the kind of two key drivers in people performing in the pits?
Well, a level of confidence, without any question of doubt. I mean, you had to be supremely confident in your own ability, whether you had any ability or not. It was immaterial, but you had to be confident in what you had, and if there was any weaknesses, you had to work very hard to make sure they stayed hidden. Because I mean, you can imagine it. There's some very, very sharp-witted, some very, very sharp people, and all they're doing is trying to hunt your weakness to sort of make a couple of quid out of you. So. But it wasn't done nasty. Well, it was done nasty, but it wasn't meant nasty. It was a game, and it was a game. I mean, I was probably one of the oldest on the floor because I'd had a sort of a semi-career before I went down there. A lot of the people who went down there found it straight from school, college. A lot of the sort of what you'd call the East End type lads and going out from there, and the South London lads going out from there. A lot of those found it, because the city had been opened up, by the sort of mid-80s, and we had Big Bang and all that sort of stuff. Those sort of lads found it, and they came, some real sharp kids that, came in and knew nothing else. And they were, they were coming in at the age of 18, 19, 20, and, and I was already, sort of up there over 30. So, it was a big difference. And, but I mean, that's what, the setting up of the exchange, and that was, it was a very proud time in my life.
Yeah, and thinking of when you mentioned your story, kind of dropped out of school and straight into work. Weirdly, I think in that environment, I wonder, was that almost an advantage as opposed to someone that came out of 4 years of a Ivy League university trying to compete in those pits, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a few. Should we say highbrow people down there who, in the old sort of families that they put their kids, they used to put them in the army or the church, or the city, and in the family stockbroker or whatever it might be, and obviously that side was quite quiet in the 80s, so a lot of those sort of guys they put them down the life market for some experience, and there was some fantastic sort of very, very well educated people for some very senior families. And there was some, the other side of it who were very well educated, very well brought up, but completely useless. But you could say that about anyone, or any type of people.
True.
I remember taking some guy who came out of a family that owned half of Scotland, and me and a mate had a dog running at Walthamstow, and running at Wembley. It normally ran at Walthamstow. And we were speaking to him. He was about 6'8". His family owned half of Scotland. Going to inherit gazillions. And we said to him, "Do you want to come and watch the dog tonight at Wembley?" And he said, "That'd be marvellous." So we said, "Well, we'll jump the underground. We'll jump on the subway and go and see the dog." He said, "I've never been on the subway." The guy sort of like 28 years old is just never been on a subway. And it's just lived a different world. Had a chauffeur dropped him off at work every morning and picked him up. But that was probably, in hindsight, one of the things that attracts so many people to markets like the life market. You think it's, majority of people there would never have met each other if it hadn't been for an exchange, because, anyone from around the M25 could get into the life market and work there. So you ended up meeting people from all over London and the suburbs that you would never have met if you'd have gone and worked in an office or gone and, worked in a normal sort of career. And it was there's people working in there from New York, from Chicago, some from Japan, some from Italy, and there was people from all over the place, and it really widened your horizons and added to your knowledge, and it was a very not divided sort of country in those days, but you were brought up I went to a secondary school, but you were brought up in a secondary school and you were sort of almost told you were not as good as the people who went to the high schools, and you were not as good as the people who went to university, and that's just how it works, I mean, it's not, I'm not trying to make out I've got a chip on my shoulder, but, it's just the way it was. And, going into an environment where there's, all sorts of people was a big learning curve for a lot of people because they just hadn't been exposed to that before. And it was, highly educational. But coming straight out of school and going to work, yes, was, but I mean, when I came out of school, there was jobs. You didn't come out of school and do nothing. There was always jobs, and didn't matter what they were, but there was always a job. Unlike today, when there's not necessarily a job to go to. There was no fear about getting a job. It might not be what you want, but there wasn't a fear about getting a job, and that's the times have changed dramatically. But I mean, I've always been a firm believer that hands-on experience is as good, if not better, than going through the sort of the college uni system, unless you're very, very intelligent and need that extra coaching. But I think we're getting off the subjects now, so
yeah. No, but I completely agree with that point, right? But you said something interesting about lots of people being drawn to markets, right? And it's the thing I think about, if you're trading a market, it doesn't necessarily matter. It doesn't matter at all, actually, where you're from. All that matters is your idea and how you implement it, which is just an intriguing idea. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be a great trader, and it doesn't matter what your background is.
No, it's just a big melting pot. Each pit was a big melting pot, and the only difference really was, and I've said it numerous times in various sort of conversations and these podcasts I've done, that you find your emotional strength quite quickly, and you find and I still believe it today that you should find the contracts that work with your emotion and work with your personality, and if you've got an exuberant personality like I had and probably still have, although it's been tempered somewhat because of age, but you've got that exuberant personality, you tend to home into the exuberant type of pits, like the long ends, or like the BTB and the Bund or the S&Ps. You don't necessarily go into the sort of the STIRS type contracts, which are on normally somewhat slow, although that wasn't the case on ERMs and situations like that. But I mean, they're normally a much slower trade, and it's not saying they're any better or any worse. It's just, I think, especially for the young lads trying to trade these days, they read so many books about trading is trading and everything's the same when you trade. And I think trying to find the contracts that fit your personality and your emotional strengths or weaknesses, is one of the best things you can do before you start anything else, because. You're going to react in a certain way when things go wrong and when things go well. And sometimes running a good trade is the hardest thing in the world. Running a bad trade is easy because you just cut it, but running a good trade can take a tremendous amount of emotion out of you. But and that's something that I mean, I know I'm jumping about a bit here, but when I was running Tower, we got a head shrink in, a young lad who was an ex-trader who'd gone and taken numerous courses. Mind management and coaching, and we had him working pretty much full time. Steve Desborough, his name was, and we had him working pretty much full time to get people's heads straight. And I think we were the first company that had sort of done that in London. That was sort of 08, 09, I think. And if a trader was having a bad run for any length of time, or you could see he was like pulling his hair out on the desk. We'd get him an hour with Deso, and. He'd try and sort of unlock his mind a little bit and try and calm him down and, steer him in the right direction. And it was hugely successful. Quite a lot of traders. Some traders didn't take to it, obviously. It doesn't work for everybody. There's no one size fits all. But a lot of traders that opened their mind up, it's a bit like any sort of therapy, isn't it? It helped their trading enormously, even if it was only helping them to get organised more for their trade. And but so and he's still doing that today. For quite a lot of I think he does a lot of work now for banks and sort of big commodity funds and people that because it's a very stressful world. But anyway, so going back, the emotions are the thing that, and we've sitting on the life market and you walk out and there's you walk past grown men sitting on the steps of the Royal Exchange crying their eyes out because of what's happened to them during the day, and it becomes a very sort of emotional experience, the whole thing. And it's not like you want to take them for a beer because they might top themselves. And a couple of people did down there, I must admit. But it was something that had never been experienced in sort of London or Europe before that. And the kids and the guys who were going into it, myself included, I was a little bit older. we really didn't know what we were doing. You know, it was this big bear pit, and we all loved every minute of it, and we all thought we'd arrived, but none of us really knew what we were doing. You know, we didn't have any game plan, we didn't have any particular knowledge of the markets and such, and the news. You know, there was no mobile phones, wasn't even pages when we started on Life. You know, you found out the close of the Treasury bonds in Chicago by picking the FT up the next day, and that was sort of about it. And you know, we didn't really understand what we were involved in, and it just evolved over time. And you know, and obviously the communications improved dramatically towards the sort of, you know, late 80s and early 90s, but you know, even going into the late 90s, you know, the internet was still quite a novel thing, and there was nowhere near the communications and the news services we've got now. You know, which is why some of the moves on Life were so extreme, because they were almost on slow-mo to a large extent. You know, it's like you get a non-farm figure on Life, and you know, there'd be, you know, 2,000 people deathly silent 10 seconds before the figure comes out, and the figure comes out. No one's got a clue what they're doing. No one's really prepped themselves up, because the information's not there to prep yourself up. You're just following the next guy, you know, and the market was all over the place. And, you know, there's fortunes made and lost in those periods. And, you know, it's like, you know, it was just like a big fight at school, really. I mean, you know, everyone was cheering and shouting and jumping up and down and singing songs. And but, you know, that just, you know, took the nerves away, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was huge nerves in front of figures and data releases. And that's really where event trading started. But, you know, it's all very well to look back on Life and, you know, rose-coloured glasses. But, you know, we had an edge. You know, the guys on the floor had the edge. You know, everything that traded in financial futures had to go through the floor. And it had to go through the booths, and it had to go through the pits. And, you know, we had an edge that at the time we probably didn't realise how good an edge it was. Some people abused it, some people didn't, but you know, it was there to be taken advantage of, and you know, some people did far better than others. But it was an edge that no one really understood till probably the mid-late 90s, and by which time, when it got so obviously, you know, an edge, and cab drivers were coming down, they'd lease a seat and they'd come down and do an hour's work on the Life market before they went and drove their cab for the day. You know, there was only one way to go, and that was it had to end. So, you know, it's, but yeah, you know, it was just, you know, but it you know, it set the wheels in motion for what we've got today, and which is a far better market in reality, but obviously nowhere near as much fun and enjoyable as it was for the young kids who and others who got involved in the Life market.
Yeah, and you know, when we talked before, I think you'd mentioned there a lot of pit traders struggled to transition to the electronic side. Was that the main reason, because they had the edge of the kind of everything having to come through the exchange at Life, and then once the electronics kind of took over, that edge was gone?
Yeah, I mean, there'd been a big resistance from a lot of traders on the floor. I can't remember when the Life market set up its after-hours electronic system. I can't remember what it's called now, and it was only for a couple of hours after the pitch shut. But it was obviously quite a big resistance to that. But some people took to it. But there was a tremendous amount of people who just couldn't believe that it was going to end. You know, I mean, I'd seen the sort of commodity markets die on their feet at one point, and I remember saying to a few people, you know, when this dies, you'll know it's gone, you know it's dead, and you've got to sort of move on to something else. But you know, it was so big, you know, and it was such a vast market that I think a lot of the people just couldn't believe it was going to end, and no one really appreciated how overpaid they were in that particular era, because the edge was on the floor, and it was pretty much limited amount of people you could get there. You know, the salary base was extreme. It would be a lot of the salaries down there then would be thought of as extreme now, you know, 25 years, 30 years later. And no one really appreciated, you know, how fortunate they were to be there, and thought that because they were worth, you know, 100, 150 grand a year back in the early 90s, mid 90s, working in a booth, they thought about get that anywhere when they left, because that was their worth. But a lot of people who, you know, that just didn't work out, and that's why they couldn't cope. I'm talking about booth staff and not necessarily the traders, but you know, the traders, a lot of them didn't transition onto screens. The ones that have been particularly successful, and there's a few. Well, I'll never mention names, but there's a few that said that's it. That that's my edge gone. I'll go and do something completely different and keep what I've got. And they've been, most of them have been hugely successful in another area since, or they're still living on what they made back in the 80s and 90s. Everyone to their own. But it's people who try to transition but people try to trade the same way they traded on the floor, on the screen, which sort of worked for a year, 18 months before people started developing the systems, and the lines got quicker and the algos got involved, and then they got picked off very quickly, and blamed everyone else, as all traders always do. They always think the market's after them, and they know where my stops are, and which is a complete and utter load of rubbish. But every trader blames someone else for his losses. That's just what happens. But there wasn't that many people. There wasn't that many people that transitioned from the floor to the screens very well, apart from the lads who came in probably in the late 90s and hadn't experienced much of the floor, and had been learning about the technology and the new sort of after hours system. So they probably transitioned best. But there was a for probably 7 or 8 years there was quite a resistance to employing ex-life traders in the city, because they thought they were overrated, overpaid, and too full of themselves. And that only turned around in sort of probably late O's, around 2009-10, when a few of the people started employing ex-traders because they actually understood what they were doing. And ever since then, there's been quite a demand for people who had somewhat of experience on the life market, because it did teach you a tremendous amount about everything.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I had a guy on, Rob Carver, who was a big systematic hedge fund guy, built systematic strategies. But I was asking him, about the advantages of having worked in institutions, and he said something similar, that you get all of these very smart people in, and this is maybe in the mid 2000s, but they started re-employing people that had worked in places like LIFFE, because they had the hands-on experience of what markets are, how they move, and the kind of DNA type stuff of markets and what they are, as opposed to some rocket scientist who's asking you what a floating rate bond is. That's designing a strategy, trying to bridge that divide.
No, I mean, they're absolutely right. But I mean, there's a role for all those, every sort of guy. But the guys who came out of the life market, there was a few rocket scientists down there, but not many. Most of them were hands-on traders. People that you could stick in Billingsgate, or you could stick in a Smithfields, or any market, into any meat market or anywhere, and they trade. They get on with it. And there's an inner ability to be able to trade and read a market, whatever it might be, and that sort of developed with quite a few people from the life market, because of the experiences they had around them. And I think you have to, some of the systems that are out there these days are just unbelievable. But no one has come up with, I've got quite a few friends who are sort of developing systems, and they're all sort of keeping it to themselves like this. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing, in case someone nicks it. And I said, there's banks and funds, and they're spending gazillions, tens of millions of quid a week trying to find systems to operate. They're not bothered about your little two-pot system you developed at home. You're not going to come up with a system that is always going to be right, because if it was there, it would have been done already. And all the best systems need tweaking pretty regular, because as soon as they work, other people find them. So right. It's and so a lot of the guys you mentioned, Tony, earlier on, are still using their inner knowledge that they developed on the exchanges, and combining it with the technical skills and other skills that algorithmic stuff allows you to use, and putting the two together is probably the dream scenario to a large extent, because it gives you the best of both worlds if you got the time and ability to be able to manage it.
Yeah, 100%. And to be honest, I've been trading for about 3 years, but kind of only found my way personally like what worked for me in the last 6 to 9 months working with an old FX spot trader, 40 years in banks, and it is that it's taking a view on the market. You're trading in the narrative that's driving it, and then you pair it with the technical setups that give you a little bit of an edge and help you with risk management. But the view, for me, the view has to be there basically, or else there's much less edge in it. It's just the technicals then.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think if you're going to take some, if someone you're listening to who's got experience in the market, there's two different types of experience in the market, and they are hugely separated. One is the banks traders and the desk traders, who a lot of them are fantastic traders, but they trade with a bank book, which gives you that. It gives you a little bit more leeway with I know they've got risk controls in it, but it's not the same as having your arse hanging out the window on every trade. And they trade a bigger book, obviously, and it's hugely, much bigger sums of money. But the worst thing that can happen to them is they lose their job and they go and get another one. For the guys who do, as I said, like live with their arse hanging out the window. If they lose the plot, they lose their house, they probably lose their family, they lose everything, and it's a different way to trade than it is, having a responsibility of a job and a responsibility of your whole life and your family are two different things. And again, some people can handle one better than the other. Some people were made to do one, and it's just that's why I say you've really got to understand and find your inner self and find your emotions and find your, how you cope with things. Because, I paid my mortgage off in 1987, I think, and vowed never to have another mortgage in my life because I worked in such a risk business. And, the last thing I could cope with doing was going home and saying to Mrs. we've lost the house, because that was your security. So, in hindsight, completely the wrong thing to do. If I'd have geared up for the last 30 years, I'd have had probably a much bigger property portfolio than what I've ended up with. But it's a choice you make, and always trading with I started trading my own money probably late 70s, I guess, and I've been trading my own money ever since. And I've had some significantly good times and some significantly horrible times, and it's both of them teach you a lot. And, it's not everyone's choice. And, you get to, my age and you look back and you wish you'd have kept a bit more of the good times and not given away so much in the bad times. But that was the game we were in, And I was, as I said to you earlier on, I was always an extravagant type of, person stroke trader. And, that's the way it was. Some people never gave anything back, but they never had the sort of, the upside that, if you're in that business, you've got to be looking at good upside. Otherwise, what's the point of all the sleepless nights, the risk and everything else? Anyway, carry on. Sorry, digressing again.
No, that's because it's hard because you bring up, I want to go back, but you bring up great points when we're talking that I don't want to not miss either, right? But one you said there was, the times where you obviously you give a bit back too much, or maybe you get a bit greedy. And you said it the same to me last week. And after you said it, I'd been reading around and I found a kind of similar quote from Stanley Druckenmiller, who's a big hedge fund. I think I've got his name right there.
Yeah, I know.
Big hedge fund owner. And, he was talking about, when people give out about being greedy, and he was like, sometimes you have to be a quote fat pig, to make your money in the business. And if you're always trying to diversify and be super systematic, yes, I think it works for some people that are super systematic, but sometimes, you really kind of, and yes, it takes years of experience. I'm not recommending it to anyone that's new, but you get the feeling, and then you have to kind of hit it a bit in the moments that it's time to hit it.
It's time to step on the gas. Sometimes you have to put the foot to the metal, and and accept the consequences. But you don't do it on every trade. But there's, I've always tried to grade my sort of, my views on a sort of 5-star rating. And if I've got a 5-star view and I look at a few technicals and they sort of align, then it's a foot to the floor type trade. And it's just, you have to do that to move on, and sometimes it goes wrong. But as long as you're prepared to cut when you're wrong and accept you're wrong, you've got half a chance anyway. And you get used to cutting your losses, to be perfectly honest. Because I mean, most traders that have as many losses as they have profits, it's just that they manage the profits significantly better.
Yeah. Yes, and a lot of this stuff I was planning getting into on the tower side, right? But before we jump to it, I had one question about when you bought your seat in LIFFE, because I think it's mentioned, but I don't know if people get how significant it was, right? So you were the first person to buy your seat in LIFFE, and the only other people on the exchange were basically major institutions and banks. So are there any moments that you still remember now clearly from your time there?
Without a prompt. I mean, there's so many stories, but I mean, standing in the pit with, I mean, I'm Alan James Dickinson, so my badge was AJD, and I had AJD futures, and I remember standing in the pit one day, and I had Salomon Brothers one side, Barclays Bank, Wed Durlacher, and I think Greaves and Grant the other side. I mean, all sort of, one American mob, but basically British institutions standing around me, asking me what I thought of the market. And, I found it absolutely amazing that they bothered to ask me with all the knowledge and all the info they've got behind them. And I was a bloke on his own, and my wife was doing my sheets. It's, but I mean, that was the opportunity that life gave people, And I was fortunate. I saw the opportunity first, only because I was fortunate enough to have worked in New York for a couple of years, and that's probably why. But I mean, the £20,000 for the seat. I mean, that was 1982. That was, you could comfortably buy a house for that. So it wasn't a cheap investment. And it was as an individual punt. It was outside of the reams of most people. Especially since most companies didn't believe it was going to work and thought it was a complete waste of money, and only bought seats because the bank instructed them to help develop the new market in London.
Okay.
So it's just there was there's so many experiences on the LIFFE market, and when I've organised a couple of lunches for a friend of mine, Tony Laporta, who lives in Las Vegas these days, and he comes back every so often. I organise a lunch for basically the old guys from the market who were around in the 80s. And, the stories flow freely, as you can imagine. And most of them, everyone's forgotten until they start talking about them. So to come up with a list of stories is impossible without having a whole group of guys around you and the conversation flows.
Right.
There was so many funny moments. There were so many fantastic things we got involved in. We had a LIFFE football team, we had LIFFE golf days, we had LIFFE concert nights, we had all sorts of things, and every one of them. I mean, back in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, we were the sort of footballers of our sort of time, really. I mean, the money was flowing quite well, and most of the guys didn't mind spending it, and sort of helicopters to Royal Ascot and all that sort of stuff. It was.
Wow.
It was big fun, but there's loads of those stories, and it's the wrong format to go through them. If you want to do stories of the floor, you need to get 15, 20 guys, senior guys who are there from a long while, and just treat them to a long lunch and just listen to the stories, because then you'll get a very varied sort of choice of stuff. Most of it you won't be able to repeat anywhere, obviously, but most of it will be said, or the police would come and arrest us all, because those times are different, and people judge those times through today's prism, which is absolutely wrong. Those were the days they were, never to be met again. But every generation always says they had it best, which is probably completely wrong, because the kids coming into the market these days have got the best opportunity the world's ever given them, far better than we had or anyone else had. It's just different. But we had a great time, and we loved every minute of it. And I'm sure the kids who are coming into the exchanges and the banks and hedge funds today are going to say exactly the same. They're having the best of it, and good luck to them. It's what we help create, along with people who help create markets back 100, 200 years ago. There's a stage to everything, isn't there? And the edge changes every used to change every 50, 60 years. It probably now changes every 10, 15 years, if not shorter. It's just trying to work out where the next edge is and, trying to position yourself accordingly. But at the moment, I think the edge is with old, experienced traders utilising technical knowledge and some algorithmic experience as well. And, there you have a chance.
I would say, I'm happy to pay for lunch if you give me a seat with one of these guys when you're organising. I'll come with my camera and my recorder, and I don't have to publish it anywhere, just for myself.
The only problem, the last one I did, there was some very senior people who you would recognise their names, and the last thing they want is overexposure. So
an Irish guy with a camera.
We've had a couple of gate crashers turn up and try to have pictures taken with the appropriate people, and it's not gone down very well. But it's most people are private. It's we had to be that way. So.
Yeah.
But they say if you want the stories, you got to do interviews with loads of different people and pull the strings together. But it's a lot of hard work to do that. And it was a moment in time, and it's really, I think, only interested to. And I've always thought it's only interested to people who were sort of down there as well, maybe on the peripheries. But I've had quite a few of the youngsters that are sort of using TraderLab and coming new into the system. That all they want to do is talk about the old days, which astonishes me. That's one of these days I might get paid for it.
Well, I think looking back at different things, we can say yes, it was a different time and a different way of trading, but I think there's always lessons to be learned in trading because a lot of it, because it's such a big psychological element to it. So a lot of the things that happen there. The journeys people go on, you can relate to or take something from. And it was just a bit of a spectacle. When I first came across the, LIFFE, the open outcry pits was when I first spoke to Jason Sen. And I had Jason on however long ago. And I just thought it was mad. I thought this is the way things were. And it's still what people think of sometimes that are not in the industry now of what it's sometimes a stock market is like, right? So, I think people are really fascinated by it still.
Yeah, it could never. People say, "I wish it's still going." I said, "We could never handle the volumes you've got these days. It's impossible." I think the target on the first day, I seem to remember, was 5,000 lots there was only the Euro-dollar market open then, but and I remember the first day we got up to the exchange got up to 100,000 lots. Bells went off, whistles went off. There was champagne chucked around. It was a massive achievement, and then it went from like 100,000 to 250,000 to 500,000 to 1 million, and then up from there. But take it on 20 years. When I was running Tower, on a busy month we'd do 14, 15 million lots, and that's just as a sort of prop house. So small prop house really in the current environment. So the exchange, and it was physical work that. Done on pen and paper, really. The computers and technology only grew as the exchange grew, and it could never have handled the amount of volume that goes through the markets these days. Never.
Yeah.
And so that's how it changes, and so it goes on.
Yeah, and it's a great segue into your time at Tower, right? For people that don't know, Alan was the CEO of Tower, which was I think it's fair to say one of the biggest prop firms, for people that only know online prop firms, real life prop firms with desks in Europe, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We had, when I went there, the guy who owned it was a big trader himself, very big trader, and he'd already sold a business for significant sums. He was the first guy to set up the offices and the screen-based trading. Mac Futures it was. And I think he sold that for, many tens of millions. And he was still only in his late 20s, so he was quite a young man and just decided to sort of go again, really. And he had a small shop in London, in Tower 42, that, wasn't... And he was residing abroad for obvious reasons. He had this shop that was costing him a couple of quid and he was a bit bored with it. And a couple of people who worked for him said, you get hold of me. They knew me from the floor, and because I'd owned 2 clearing companies on the floor before I sold them. They said, get him to try and sort your business out, try and help you out. And he came to me and he said, I've told you you're the man for the sort this business out. Do you fancy having a go? So I was sort of pretty much doing a bit of training from home, playing a lot of golf and doing bits and pieces, and not really thinking about going back to work. And my wife said, you're too young, you're getting lazy, you're getting fat, you're getting lazy. Go and sort yourself out. So I took this job. I think I took it for 18 months to try and help him sort it out. And I was there 9 years in the end. But, it goes back to the I guess the reputation. And, there was obviously a trust in what I did because, traders came to us as much as I went out and saw them. A lot of traders came to us because I was an experienced floor trader. I'd owned my own company, my own clearing company. I sort of understood the markets. Whether I understood risk or not, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they were trying to take advantage of me. I don't know. But I sort of understood, and they could relate to me as the boss, as one of them. And so a lot of guys sort of, when they were looking for a home to go to in their trading career, they approached us as much as we approached them. And I could never have done it without the team that was around me. I had the best IT man that the world had seen at that particular time. Fantastic counsel, fantastic risk department. A couple of sort of like guys who were my sort of right and left hand men. Whether I'd built that team up or whether the others, I think jointly we built it up, but it was a really good team and it was trusted and they were very good at their jobs. And we attracted a lot of traders. I mean, at the peak, I think we had 500 traders, all of which we were financing to. Well, not financing. Most people put their own money down to start with. And, we didn't do what they do these days and try and sort of take their pants down and take the spread and everything else. The genuine prop firms, are trying to encourage you to make money. Now, they might be taking a reasonable percentage out of it, and they might be taking reasonable fees out of it, but their job is to encourage the individual to make money, nothing else. Whereas a lot of the shops that are around these days doing CFDs and spread betting and that sort of stuff, their spreads widen in busy times. You can't get out when the market's volatile. You're trading against the book. You're not trading against the market. And that's why I've always advocated trading. If you can trade into the exchange, if you can get yourself in a position to trade into the futures markets, you're trading the biggest, deepest, most liquid pits businesses in the world. You've got half a chance. But as soon as you're in a shop where they widen the prices when there's non-farm coming out, the exchange is widening the price, but it's not the exchange that widens the price. It's the people putting the orders in. And they've all got market makers, although market makers' job is not to trade, it's to make prices. Good prop shops will really want, and they'll encourage, if people have got a 5-star trade, they'll encourage them to take that extra step on the risk. I know a lot of the coaches these days, say you must do sort of never risk more than 2% of your pot, and when you're down to 20%, you're done, all the rest of it. But that's fine if that's the way you want to lead your life. But if you really think you've spotted something that that deserves an extra push, then you should be allowed to do that push. And so we risk a lot of our traders on their P&L rather than on their rather than on their percentage. So if someone's got we give them limits way and above what you'd get at most shops. But most of the traders and these guys used to say to these so-called professionals, they say, well, it's the riskiest game in the world. Aren't you scared about it all? And it's you've got to remember, nearly all these guys had skin in the game. Nearly all these guys had money of their own sitting there. And I used to say, well, the last person who wants to lose money is them. It's not like they're ripping the company off because it's their money. We're holding their money, and if they started with even if it was a tenner, I mean, most people started with 20, I guess, but even only put a tenner down, but we liked them. we'd gear them up and we'd encourage them to, get up to a pot of 25, 30 and leave it there and start stripping out above that. And then, if they got up to 50 and left it there, they'd probably get themselves a 90-10 deal, even a 95% 5 deal, because, we wanted the traders to have the skin in the game so we could encourage them to push more with the right type of risk. And, if they're always trading someone else's money, you're liable to get the people turn up and just go all in red or black. And that's not what we were building at Tower. We were building, a professional bunch of, a real professional bunch of traders. And a lot of them were significantly better than anything I'd ever seen on the floor. But they were different type of traders. And I remember when, we had one guy, and he'd been a good trader. He'd nicked his 50s and his 75s every so often on a day. One day he nicked $1 million, and I sort of got hold of him pretty quickly afterwards, and I said, what are you going to do now? And he said, I don't do this, I'll be in it together. I said, I'll tell you what we should do. You should go down to travel agents, you should book yourself a round the world ticket or whatever and go away for a month. I said, I've been in a similar situation and all I've done was give it back. I said, you lose focus, you lose discipline, you lose everything. So go away, get yourself straight, have a lovely holiday, remind yourself what you've just done, cut everything back down and come and start again with your 25, 30 grand. I said, that might hurt you to do that, but, that's the way you're going to keep it, build it up again, because otherwise your stops get a little bit wider, your discipline gets a little bit laxer, and then you start chasing what you think, well, I've given that back, I shouldn't have done that, I'll get that back before I stop, and then you chase a bit more and it goes down, you chase a bit more, and then you're on a slippery slope. So hardest thing in the world is to take a break when you've had a great day, and but that's what you should do, Anyway, that's
Yeah, no, I'd say it's such a great point. People associate losing as if it's the negative thing, but I've always found that when I start to go on tilt a bit is after 3 or 4 winners. Then the ego starts to kick in, and all of a sudden you don't feel any different, but you have you're smudging risk management. So I mean, did the guy take the holiday?
No, he didn't, but he did take a week off.
Okay.
Well, I think he ended up he just got shit-faced for a week, I think, and that was it. But
you should have changed it 10% for the advice.
But you never expect people to take your advice, but you feel like I always wanted to offer it, just so they might think about it. Because if someone doesn't offer advice or offer opinion, people don't think about it. It's all merging into a fantastic success story, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And the biggest problem is, you get dissatisfied very quickly if you regularly nick 50 grand and you come in and you're 2 or 3 grand up or 2 or 3 grand down. It's like, well, what's the point? What have I bothered to do this for? So you lose focus, and you have and then stripping your account down to a sensible level where you don't get that exposure and you have to build it back up again does really reinforce the discipline quite sternly. Otherwise, you do lose it, and it's emotions again, isn't it? I mean, that is the business.
Yeah, and going back to your point on when Tower was scaling to 500 people, I guess you must have had a process for vetting people that you were giving seats to. Was there?
Yes and no, really, because we were, the guys on the floor were often bringing people in, or I wanted to bring their mates in, or someone they knew in, and we were always happy to split the risk. So if a guy says, "Well, I've got this chap, he's over at whatever somewhere else, and he wants to come here because we're giving a better service, and our systems are better, our squawks are better, and everything else," and but I want to back him. We'd let them back him, and they just run out of one account, or we'd split the risk and we'd both back them. So, a lot of the guys coming in, very few people just came completely cold. Most people came with some experience and through a contact within the company, which for us was fantastic because it meant that our traders were happy to be there because they were recommending other people, their friends in other prop shops, to come to us because the service was so much better. And a lot of that was down to our IT guy, Chris Brown. I mean, he was just absolutely fantastic. But it's, and he was COO, I think, and he was just out of this world. And every trader could, rely on him, and he sorted stuff out so quick. Because in the early days of the screens and everything else, obviously, there's a lot more problems than there is these days. Lines dropping and stuff going wrong. And most of the traders aren't particularly technologically savvy. So, when something goes wrong, it's not like they can fix it themselves. They need someone else. And, Chris and his team were just fantastic at that. Anyway, but yes, I mean, we did have controls in place. We did have vetting. Had to go through the risk department. Obviously, we had AML and all the normal stuff that goes on. But, most trading is down, and if someone wants to put 10 grand up of their own money, we'd gear them up to let them push on, but we wouldn't let them push on too much until we got to understand their style of trading. I mean, it's amazing that, a risk team could see if someone had a glass of beer or a glass of wine just by looking at the way they trade. So, they get used to every trader's got a pattern, even if they don't know they have. They've got a pattern or a way of doing things. It's amazing how things sometimes change after lunch. And it's, it's a quiet word in the ear from the risk team. And if there's no notice taken, then it's a slightly more quiet word from me to sort of, just explain to him what the situation is. But, you're trading your own money. We're not babysitters. We're there to encourage them to trade, and we're there to encourage them to make money. If they want to lose it, it's sort of up to them. We're not babysitters. You weren't babysitters. So, but there's very, very, very successful traders there. Far more successful than I could have ever dreamt of on the exchange. And a lot of them are still there.
Well, and I asked that question just because, you're aware of the kind of rise of online prop firms in the industry at the moment. And just for people that maybe didn't want to take the route, was there something they could build up towards going to a real prop shop, if they had to, I don't know, track their trades, hit ratios, etc. But it sounds like it's more just maybe kind of a warm sale, and maybe know someone and put your own money up, and then you're...
Yeah, I mean, it's such a choice these days, but the prop world is unfortunately quite an unregulated world. People just don't understand it, and I don't think there's a want to understand it either. It's thought of as being out there and a bit dirty and a bit scruffy. And some of the prop houses, they say they're funding you. They're not funding you. They're just, they say they know the ratios. They know the percentages of traders who come out of nowhere and lose, and it's a very high percentage. So it's just like playing a game. They just take the other side of the book on most of them, that's why I've always advocated, if you can, trade into the futures market, because you're getting, the real price. And you stand a chance. You haven't got to worry about getting in. There's never an issue getting into a trade. The big problem comes getting out of a trade. And so if you're in the futures market, you might not like the price, but there will be a price. If you're in some of the CFD traders and you're in some of the FX houses, there won't be a price. And that's it, you're done. But I mean, have I kept in touch with all the latest movements and the latest prop shops? No, I haven't. I'm very singular in the way I do things. As I said earlier on, I've always sort of stood on my own 2 feet. I've got spread betting accounts, and I've got silly little accounts that I mess about with, a couple of quid here and there, but not. But I'm still, now Trump's back in, I'm seriously thinking about opening up again, with a proper prop shop, and giving it another roll of the dice, because I think there's going to be some great opportunities, and I'll just allocate an amount of funds and have another go, and if it goes, it goes, and if you have some fun with it and it pays for a few holidays, good luck. But if you need to make money, don't go into trading, because if you need to make money and you're going to be with a prop shop, there is a cost to being with a prop shop, because the facilities are so much better than they are at the shall we say, the funded houses.
Yeah.
So you have to make a certain amount every month to cover your costs. Then you have to make a certain amount to make it worthwhile. And all of a sudden, you can be putting pressure on yourself. So if you need to make a living, you shouldn't be doing that, because, you should be trading when you don't need that money. You should be trading when your mind is free. Now, I know a lot of guys do advocate, a lot of the more senior prop shops advocate, you should have a year's worth of funds to live on, and not touch your trading account, which, I 100% agree with. Because if you need to make 10 grand a month to cover your costs and a living, and you have one bad month, then all of a sudden you need to make 20. And then you're putting pressure on yourself, and, you're going to take trades that you shouldn't be trading. I've seen it so many times. It's it's a vicious business, and obviously it takes no prisoners. It's the nature of the beast. When your money runs out, you're gone. And or even if you don't, if even you're at a prop shop and you're not making them enough money, you're gone. You have to perform on a pretty solid basis and a consistent basis. You can have massive ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but everyone's in it to make money, and that's the cold hard truth of the business.
Yeah. And because you mentioned some of the best traders you've ever seen were in, say, Tower. For those traders, was there anything specifically that struck you about them, or personality, or different approaches to the market that they had?
Well, when I first went into Tower, most of them, a lot of them had come out the grad trading schemes. Mac Futures had a grad trading scheme. I think Marix had a grad trading scheme. I think the OSTC hadn't started then, but there was a few grad trading schemes around, and some of them, had developed some really seriously good traders who understood the markets and understood the news, and in a very short space of time, event trading was something that wasn't really around when I sort of went there. But then with the squawks coming, and obviously people had traded figures and stuff like that before, but with the squawks, and Harry Daniels, I think, was one of the first ones at Live Squawk, who we had right from the early days. With that advent of 24-hour sort of squawking news, they realised that was the opportunity. That was a new edge, and Harry used to get the news quicker than almost anybody else. So obviously the news was piped in, and those guys were sitting there prepped up, ready to trade. They sort of researched what possible news should come out. They researched any speeches that had been had previously by any of the central bank governors, whether it be European, US, or UK. Waiting for any change of a word or in a sentence, and they did tremendous research into the background of every bit of news that might come out, and they were prepped up ready every single day to take advantage of one bit of news that would come out that no one else might be looking at, and so they were very, very professional at that, and they didn't mind pushing the barrel out either. I mean, they used the risk that they were offered by the house fully, and they were very, very successful at it, and created teams within teams that were doing a similar thing in all sorts of markets. So that was something I would never experienced on the floors, because it was a different sort of market. But those guys created their edge, and then obviously by the early teens, I guess mid-teens, a lot of the guys, they had programs written to take advantage of one word that might be changed at a European speech, European governor's speech, and so the systems were doing somewhat of that trading because it was quicker. But they were still very quick on pushing the button, and in the futures market, they traded a lot of foreign exchange. Or they didn't trade foreign exchange; they traded FX futures, because we never got involved in the FX market because of last look. We were approached constantly by the FX houses and the banks to trade FX, and I said to them all, one is last look. I'm not putting anyone at this company at risk when you can cancel a trade that's already been done, and because it would just wipe everybody.
Can you explain that last look? Because I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, last look in the foreign exchange market is the bank has the last look on the trade. So if you make a trade with a bank and they decide that they want to cancel it, they can.
Okay.
So and it's very, very unusual for it to be operated, but it is in their mandate. So, and I had numerous rows about this with banks because they said, well, it'll never happen, it will never happen. When we had the Swissy crisis, I don't know if you remember the Swissy crisis, I can't remember the exact details, but that particular, when it was re-rated by a significant amount, the FX market cancelled most of the trades after they'd been hedged on the futures market. So the guys were just left hanging with futures positions, which vindicated my point to a large extent. And plus the fact you can't get the size off in the foreign exchange market after a figure or when it's busy because everyone just shuts up shop. Futures market's always got a price, and we were getting 1,000-lot clips off on the FX markets in futures, and you couldn't even trade the FX cash. But by the time you could trade the FX cash, we were all out. We'd got in and out and tied it up and gone down the pub. But it's. But I mean, the banks, and that goes back to the institutions. They always try and keep the upper hand, and I found it scandalous that in with the regulatory regime that we were under as a prop house. We were all fully regulated, obviously, and I've been fully regulated all my life, but. All the regulations we were under, the banks can cancel a trade if they deem it they want to. Scandalous, absolutely scandalous. I'm not sure. I think it's still the case these days, but I hadn't checked. I'm not in the business like that anymore, so I don't. It's of no concern of mine, but it's absolutely scandalous that was allowed, and as far as I'm aware, is still allowed. Anyway. I'm sure you'll get some comments. If you put that one out there, I'm sure you'll get some comments from banks.
Well, I do work for a bank, I'll remind you. So we might cut that.
Go in and ask them.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be their favourite person now. Yeah. But back on those characteristics, right? One you said was kind of building, refining their edge. The other one was knowing when to not step on the gas or increase risk. And then on the flip side, with the hundreds of traders you've seen and coached or that have come and gone, that have done it kind of unsuccessfully, were there anything particular about those types of traders that stuck out to you?
Well, most people, I think the ones that fail are the ones that they've never really appreciated the risk in the business, and all they're looking at is, that's just cost me 50 quid, that's just cost me 100 quid. It's like you have to treat it as a numbers game to a large extent. If you start, thinking about the actual value of what you're trading, it's very off-putting, and it gnaws at you. So you work out you work on the figures of the market. You don't work on the P&Ls, and a lot of the guys that failed always had their P&L screen up on their TT machine, and wow. As soon as a guy's got his P&L screen up on the machine, you tend to worry a little bit because he's worrying about the money and not worrying about the position. And if your P&L is determining when you get in and out, maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Because you're looking at putting a position on for a reason. You're not, and okay, it might be to make whatever it is, but you can't go into a position thinking, well, I'm going to make £1,000 on that and that's done. You're looking to get in at a level and out at a level, or if it goes wrong, get out at a different level. And obviously the P&L is important, but you might have 100 trades in a day, of which 50 are winners and 50 are losers. If you start P&L trading everything, you're never going to get anywhere. You'll always end up with zero at the end of the day or less. And you should be in the trade for a reason, and that reason is the price. It's not the P&L. Yeah. Price is the ultimate determinant of the price is always right. And no matter how much you think it's wrong, the price is what it is. The price is always right. It's a dissemination of people's positions.
Mm.
You hear
Yeah.
so many traders, as I said earlier on, the market's out to get me, should never have gone here, can't do this, can't do that. The price tells you where it can go, and it can go anywhere a lot worse than you've ever thought or think it can do. It can get 10 times worse, and the price tells you you're wrong. So that's it.
Yeah. Those are some eternal words, I would say.
Yeah, you had a guy on a little while ago, I think, who said, I've known a lot of bold traders, but I don't know many old bold traders, which I thought was quite a good comment. But, a lot of the older traders are bold, but it's qualified within their experience. Where bold when you're young is different to being bold when you're old.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, because my mentor, right, like we said, is spent his whole life trading in banks, but he also traded prop. He can have this thing which doesn't work for me. Whereas, say he's short dollar yen and the position is moving against him and he's increasing risk short. And I'm there like, in my head, I'm the classic never increase risk, when a position is moving against you kind of thing. But with that experience, he just experience knowing the levels, knowing the currency and how it moves. That's his style, and then we have an intervention. He makes a fortune.
He's not trading his own money. He's trading the bank's money, I presume.
Well, no, I think now he trades a fund's money. So he works for.
Okay, but the fund might have a underlying reason to always be short dollar yen, or always be long dollar yen, and a lot of the banks do work on an underlying book position. So if as long as you're aligned with the company book, it doesn't really matter if it's going wrong. If you understand what I'm saying. So again, that goes back to the bank traders and the desk traders have a different mindset to the individual trader. I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other, but it's you couldn't add to your risk if you got a position. I never average. I average up and average down, but I only average into a winner. I don't average into a loser. It's just one thing you don't do, and because the risk, the risk goes really quick, and if you've got sort of limits within your portfolio and limits in your book, if you start adding to wrong uns, it's skewing the risk quite a lot. Adding to good ones, you can tend to push the position a little bit more because you're negating the risk rather than increasing it. But as soon as you scale down buy or scale up sell, there's a point when you've just got you've got no more bullets left, and you're hanging there just waiting to be cut off. So but it's it's different. The bank book traders are different. They're trying to build in a position maybe for a month or a year, or they've got a client who wants to take that book on. So they're very. I've always found that the bank traders are critical of the locals or the individuals because they don't think they add much. I've never been critical of the bank traders, but if anything, it's that I wish they understood the position of people that have got a 20 grand account and are swinging it around a little bit, trying to make a living, and helping the liquidity, and the risks that they take on. And it's that 20 grand account is worth infinitely more than the bank's 20 million pound account in what it affects you emotionally and personally. So it's hard to understand what an individual trader's life is like without experiencing it. But you don't experience it unless it's the sort of thing you want to get into. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic lifestyle, and a fantastic career if you can handle it. But unfortunately, with the current age of the TikTok and all the rest of it, and it's sold as a glory lifestyle of Ferraris and Lamborghinis and private jets, and that's not the real story. Being an individual trader, maybe in the crypto these days it might well be. I don't trade crypto. I've chosen not to get involved in that. I'm too old, and I don't understand it. But maybe there's quite a lot of money flying around in that one, and that's great. Good luck to all those guys getting involved in it, and I wish them all well. I hope they're all billionaires quite quickly. But in the world of the futures markets and the old-fashioned markets, it's a different story. And it's and so many of these. You asked a question about the modern day prop shop. Well, the prop shops, you see the online prop shops, and we'll fund you, we'll do this, we'll do that. There's some genuine ones out there, but there's a lot of bad ones out there that are just there to take your money, and they just want more volume because it's like the spread bettors. They trade against the book. They got an A book and a B book. A book they double up and follow, and the B book they just they take the other side, and that's all a lot of these sort of smaller prop shops do. So
yeah.
But it's probably a controversial comment, but I think if you look, scratch under the surface, it's not far from the truth.
Yeah. No, and you're not the first person with that view as of recently on the prop shops that have all been slapped with lawsuits or gone under and not paid people out. So it's quite common now at the moment for people to be very skeptical of online prop firms and only really trust the ones that are the big names that have been around for 5 to 10 years, which still isn't very long.
You've got to do your own research. But I mean, there are some fantastically good professional prop shops out there, and I'm sure there's some small ones that have just started that are very, very good. But if there's one word of advice for the young trader looking for a prop shop, you've got to do your own research. And a lot of the prop shops, Tower Trading, they're still very, very successful. And they don't have everyone going in the office. Probably the large majority of their traders are sitting at home and doing it online. So, there's a lot of online prop brokerages, but they don't advertise in the sort of the modern world way. It's word of mouth, and it's and there's a commitment to be made. That's I don't want to appear that I'm having a go at prop. I'm certainly not having a go at prop shops. It's just sad that the modern exposure through the various mediums on the internet have given it a bit too much of a racy image, and it made it look too easy, and it's not. Crypto may be, and I wish all those boys well at trading crypto.
Yeah. I had a guy on a couple of episodes ago, Travis Wu, who was a big crypto trader. Wild stories. Those guys come out with some, they spend 2 or 3 years in crypto markets. I feel like they come out with the scars of a 10-year trader. Just the ups and downs, the volatility, the exchanges going under. So it's like the Wild West. Crypto markets.
And I mean, I don't want to hark back to the old days, but you have to remember, when we were working on the markets and the pits and stuff like that. I mean, there wasn't 24-hour trading. I mean, we used to be able to come in, the bell went, and you traded all day long, and the bell went and it closed, and that was it. You could trade in Chicago, you could trade the bonds and the S&Ps, but only till sort of 8 o'clock and 9:15. But very few people traded in Chicago. I mean, I was one of the addicts that did, but it was it was voice broked. There was no sort of like clicking a mouse and getting it done. You had to, and I had a direct line into the pits in Chicago when I used to trade the S&Ps, which was fun. But it was you were just, I mean, I was giving the edge to the boys in the pit, which was a bit silly really, since I had the edge all day. But but you could the bell would go at 4:15 or 4:30, whenever it. I can't even remember when it closed now. And that was it. You could go down a pub, you could go to dinner, you could go home, you could go to the gym, and you didn't have to concern yourself with what was going on. And if you had an overnight position, there's nothing you could do about it anyway, because there was no after-hours market. You could only get out of it the next day. So, there wasn't that constant 24-hour stress that you get now if you're trading. And obviously the FOMO all the time about a big move overnight, and something's happened on a Sunday night, and you should have traded, should have done this, should have done that. That was something I never experienced when I was trading properly, and I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think I'd have lasted this long, because it takes too much out of you. You have to have a break from it. You have to have a cut-off point, and whatever you miss, you miss. And the crypto boys, unfortunately, that's 24/7. At least the futures markets are really only 24/7, 5 days a week now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal. If you're a crypto trader, it must be brutal, because you can get wiped out in a millisecond at any time, 7 days a week. And
funny. Sorry, you go.
No, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, it's funny you bring up the 24/7, right? Because one of the things we talked about was trading addiction, and his challenge with that, the fact that it was 24/7, constantly checking swings in P&L. Like he started as a farmer, and then he ended up with like 100, 200 grand of Bitcoin exposure that he was trying to hedge. And then, he's only 2 years in, so he was kind of, picking carrots there one minute and he's down 50 grand another minute. And that was his story. So I just thought it was an epic story. But he said, he developed a constant need to check his position. He said it really hurt his quality of life then, right? So
it becomes your life, it's and once you let it get you like that, it's probably time to sort of move on. But if you've chosen crypto as your evil, that's what you've signed up for, and it's you just got to give yourself a time span of a couple of years to hopefully you make enough to get out of it and do something else. But I said we never experienced that, and so we could have a bad day and go down a pub and make yourself feel better with a few pints, or if you had a great day, go down a pub and make yourself feel better because you've had a great day. So, and you always talked about markets, but they shut. So everyone wanted to just have a laugh, and that was very fortunate, and I'm glad it was that way because, as I said, I don't think many of us would have survived if we were doing 24-hour markets in pits. It just wouldn't have, it would have killed us.
Yeah.
So,
but I think one new piece of information that is not in all of my questions here, which we've kind of run through pretty much all of them now, was the fact that you were thinking about, with Trump back in, maybe buying back your seat in tower trading, and
I'm not sure that if they'd had me back, I'd probably go to tower. They're a good company, but it's but they want sort of up and coming star traders, and no one's going to make any money out of me because I won't be doing that much volume. So I'll go to one of the sort of reasonable. I want to trade in the futures, so that limits the opportunities to start with. But I just think there could be some racy moves, and there's he's a very unpredictable man, Donald Trump, and things could happen and things could get out of kilter and move away from mean averages, and there's all sorts of things could happen. But so I just like to have the opportunity to, if I really sort of start to get in the feel for the market. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning. I listen to Bloomberg. I look at all the prices. It's as if I'm still working, and that's just, I think, the lifestyle we've always led. And I always formulate opinions on the markets, and I do a little bit through the spread betters, but not much. And I think with Trump back in, I think there's some opportunities if I start getting some real sort of positive thoughts on position taking in a particular area. I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to take advantage of it or not through having an account somewhere. So I'm not going to take an account and start being in front of the screen all day and night. And it's there to take advantage of times when I think I understand the market better than the market's performing, which does happen. And that leads me on a bit to sort of, my involvement with sort of TraderLab, which is a sort of quite a new company. And when I've known Lee about 20 years, the CEO, and I also knew Barney Cardwell, who used to run a £100 million fund 20 years ago, that he ran for many, many years. He's one of the advisors, same as myself. But, they're more techie. In fact, they're totally techie. And, they started this thing, TraderLab, before ChatGPT was released a couple of years ago. And it was to assist traders to backtest, their systems. And, I'd never had a system because I'm not savvy enough around a computer to build one. And I'm not a coder. And I don't really use Excel to the way it should be used. But they were developing this system, so anyone who's using Excel or coding themselves could actually put it into the TraderLab system, and it would kick out the results of their backtesting, saving huge amounts of time. I've got friends who backtest on Excel. It takes them weeks and weeks and weeks to get it out, and so they were coming up with this before ChatGPT came in. Then ChatGPT came in, and they've adapted. They got a guy called Ali Kassan there who used to be a big techie guy, and he worked for a lot of the banks in London, developing their algorithmic systems, and he's converted a lot of what they developed before that into natural language AI. So you can now sort of, you can ask it a question, like when did the 50 day, how many times did the 50-day cross the 20-day cross the 30-day in the last 5 years, and it will give you those, and then you ask it and it bolt on another question to it, well, and how many times is that in the bull market, how many times is that in the bear market. So you can drill down into probabilities, in seconds, going back 5-10 years. So, and that appealed to me because I've developed over the years quite a strong feeling for the market, quite often on days, quite often on times of the day, and I've never been able to qualify whether it's worth it or not. And something like that would enable me as a complete non-code and non-techie to actually put in what I feel and get some qualified results of probabilities coming out the other end quite quickly. So that excited me. And it sort of almost democratized retail trading, where retail traders have the ability to check out what their feelings and what their thoughts and what their systems are, the same as the banks do with huge IT. Anyway, that's given me a bit of fun for the last 3 years now. But all tech startups, they've always got a runway. So you keep getting halfway down a runway and you just want to extend the runway. So, and AI is moving on at such a pace now. Who knows? But it's hopefully we'll get the thing up and running, and hopefully we'll get it out to market quite quickly, and enable the retail traders to have as much fun backtesting their thoughts and systems as the professionals do. But, So and it will help someone like me coming back to trading as well.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and I wanted to get on to TraderLab, and I was wondering if you would end up using it now. I'm sorry to say tower trading you were going back to, but whatever means you end up going back to trading to, right? I was going to ask if you were going to use TraderLab, and I think it's a super product. And what I love about TraderLab is it has that, you say you had ideas about how the market worked. It's such a great space for someone that's a non-coder to be creative in starting to develop their strategy. And then, because oftentimes you see a back test and it just spits out, max return or max drawdown P&L, and you're kind of like, okay, but I feel like what's missing and the gap it's filling really well is that creativity process of how should this thing work? What are my ideas? How do I put them together? And then straight away you get scenarios and data, as you said.
And the scenarios and the probabilities, the probabilities of the trade are hugely valuable. You don't need to know the P&Ls, it's just the probabilities. And but I mean, at the moment, it's not. It's. I mean, all the guys developing it are very tech orientated, and I ask some really strange questions that probably not. They're not used to sort of someone like me asking those sorts of questions, because most of the questions they get are quite structured and quite organised. I'm a little bit on the random side, so there's chucks. I've given them a few challenges, but it's a super product, and it's only going to get better because the way AI is going, the way natural language is being developed, it's only going to get better and better and better. And I think it's it will be a big help to someone like me, and I imagine a lot of retail traders.
Yeah,
it's nice to still be involved. I mean, my role there really is, I'm sort of non-exec chairman stroke face at the front because I've been around forever. And there's anyone I still know that's in the city is in a senior position just because of their age, and it's nice to be involved. And we have a few meetings and a few get-togethers, and it's nice to be helping those guys out on their journey.
Yeah, but I think they've got a super kind of niche in the market, because I know, take my experience for example, buying an out-of-the-box system from a great trend follower and great trader, but I had no idea how it was supposed to behave, right? No understanding of the system. And I think, a lot of people start like that. They buy some strategy, they think it's going to make print cash for them, and then it starts to not work, and you don't understand it, so you just fall apart, right? And that having those statistics around it, I think it's the right way to start,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I would never go into a position just on technicals. I use technicals for a reason that I've got a view on the market, and I'm just trying to fine tune my entry and my exit levels, through the technical analysis of the market. And so, I'm looking at it from a slightly different way than most of the sort of new retail traders who tend to be looking for a technical advantage by using sort of charts and everything else without trying to understand the fundamentals and the reason for the move. And I think, a lot of the trading houses should probably concentrate a little bit more on getting traders to understand underneath the market and the tradable macro side of it, and then combine it with the technical analysis, and then you feel you're in it for a solid reason.
Yeah, and you said you listen to Bloomberg. Like, I listen to Bloomberg every morning, but they have that phrase, right? Context is everything, and I think that's super important. Like Bloomberg, context changes everything, I think, is the slogan, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's so true when you mentioned tradable macro there, because I guess I think it's relevant that something goes up, say, on a day that maybe it shouldn't have. I think that's more significant than it just going up, right? If non-farm payrolls comes out very strong and the USD closes lower on whatever pair you're trading, for me that's significant, right? Or euro dollar finishes up, non-farm payrolls are strong, as opposed to having no context around what's going on with Trump and USD positioning. And for me, that's where the tradable macro side kind of meets the price action, and then that's where I get all my ideas, basically.
Because if the markets don't do what you think that they should do with the analysis, there's a reason. You've either got the analysis completely wrong, or the market was severely overbought or oversold pre the news release, and the market's corrected into it. But you're absolutely right. You've got to have some understanding of the market, and it soon, once you get a small understanding, it soon develops and builds on, because you then find yourself more interested in trying to understand some of the sort of tradable macro. I mean, don't waste your time on the non-tradable, the silly little bits, but the stuff that moves markets, you really want to try and understand a little bit. And if the correlations start breaking down, there's a reason for that, and that often means we're into a new trend or starting a new trend. So, and there's another trade tomorrow. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? The market's open every day, virtually all year after year after year. You don't have to rush it today. It's not like it's going to end tomorrow, and it's not like the markets are going to close tomorrow. So, if you miss one, just be patient and wait for another one.
Yeah. An amazing way to finish, because I think Tony Laporta is going to kill me or you for spending, an hour and 40 minutes in this conversation, because I know he was looking for less than 10, right? But he's going to be severely disappointed with me and you after this comes out.
But I mean, Tony is right. It's most of these podcasts, how many do you actually get through to the end? And 10, 15 minutes is, in the, as he said, and we all say these days, that the times of, we're in instant gratification with the younger generations, and they want snapshots. They don't want sort of long drawn out conversations. They want to bash, done, move on. So, I think the podcasts as such have probably got to change their ways and to appeal to a wider audience. And it's just, so I agree with him on that, I must admit. But then what do two sort of 70-year-olds know about anything? So, Well, Tony's not 70 yet, but he's getting up there. So,
okay. Well, that's what I want to say at the end. It's been a real privilege to spend this much time with you and listen to your story. And I appreciate, maybe not everyone gets to the end of a podcast, but I think stories like yours deserve as much time as you'll be willing to spend with me. So I really appreciate that, and I hope people get a lot from it and listen to you, because you're someone that's not only just being a trader, you've coached traders, and you've lived a whole career and life in markets, right? So it's just bursting with knowledge at every minute. So real privilege to have the time, and thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it, but I mean, I love the markets. They've been very good to me, and so I've had some good times and some bad times. But I've loved my career on the markets, and it's in my blood. It's why when I get up in the morning, first thing I do is look at the prices. Turn on Bloomberg, and it's just, I love the business. It's and I couldn't think of living the rest of my life without being involved in some way, shape, or form, no matter how removed it is. It's anyway. Thanks very much for the time. Appreciate it, and I hope it's a successful podcast and people do stay to the end.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, cheers, Colin.